Before I begin, I invite us all to take a deep breath together. That's honestly more for me than for the rest of you. I need you to help me. I need you to help me create this space. Our congregations and our communities are often described as a safe space. Today, and hopefully for more days to come, I'm asking you to look at this community and congregation in a slightly different way. To look at this space as a brave space. Now, I wish I could take credit for that term, but it actually comes from Brian Arreo and Christy Clemens, who specialize in cultivating spaces for conversations around diversity and social justice. And in their invitation to help people reframe how to have those conversations, they suggest that the term safe space is often conflated with the idea of comfort, of not taking risks, of not being challenged. A brave space, however, is a space in which we recognize the risk and the pain of letting go of old ways of understanding, of learning from others, of entering into genuine dialogue and allowing ourselves to be transformed. A brave space is messy and uncomfortable, and it's honest and healing. And I hope that as a community with a mission of nurturing compassion and courage, you will join me in creating this brave space. So be honest. Who here is wondering why we are doing this teach-in? Raise your hand. Brave space. No judgment here. Who's wondering? Yeah. If I were to tell you the whole story, I would need another hour, and we're already running long as it is. But the short version is this. Unitarian Universalism, and those of us who call ourselves Unitarian Universalists, are being asked to make a choice. We are being asked to choose whether or not we will take a hard look at who we are as an institution and as a faith. We are being asked as part of a national movement to courageously question the stories we have been telling ourselves about our history and our structures, and the ways in which they and our practices reflect a problematic culture, a culture of white supremacy. Though the voices inviting us into that brave space were amplified by a recent hiring decision at the national level, they have been asking this of us and our association for a very long time. While the specifics of what has happened recently are helpful to our understanding, they aren't necessary for today's exploration. And if you are interested in learning more, you can read the UU World articles about what is going on in our association and find some resources in Borton Hall after the service. So these recent events that have resulted in multiple resignations at the national office and the selection of an incredible triad of interim presidents, they're painful and have broken open the conversation about white supremacy within UU communities and structures. But they're not the first of their kind. Unitarian Universalists and our predecessors have had a long history of these flashpoint moments when the subtle aspects of white supremacy culture in our tradition has been called to attention by the people, and particularly the people of color, who that culture directly silences, ostracizes, and harms. These moments include paternalism towards a visionary Black Unitarian minister, Egbert Ethelred Brown, whose ministry was unsupported by an American Unitarian Association dominated by the beliefs that Black people would not be able to comprehend Unitarianism. And they include moments like today, when the phrase Black Lives Matter continues to meet erasing protests grounded in discomfort in the form of all lives matter. Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition, and as such, we are a continuation, rooted in and building upon our faith, its members, their ideologies, and their actions that came before us. We are inheritors of a legacy that is incredibly beautiful and transformative, and is deeply painful and problematic. Just as we are a continuation of the liberative aspects of our faith, we are also a continuation of its oppressive sides. For those of you who are more hard evidence-minded, the most recent census data regarding the UUA's national and regional leadership tells us that 83% of the service workers at the UUA are people of color. And of the 49 positions of the UUA executive and first management level, 49 positions, 42 are held by white people. As a religious educator and organizer of this teach-in says, Christina Rivera says, it is almost the exact inverse. And as such, it's a clear indication of who has the power, the influence, and autonomy to direct policy, resources, and hiring within our association. That 86% white executive staff gets to decide the what, when, who, and how of the UUA. Suddenly we realized the flood hadn't happened yesterday or last week. It was happening here and now. We are all in this flood, here and now. And it is time for us to name it, to feel the cold water of the storm deep in our bones. For some of us, we have, in the words of the African American spiritual, been in the storm so long. And we are looking for a time to rest. We have spent our whole lives swimming in the floodwaters of a white supremacist culture that has never guaranteed us a feeling of total welcome and safety, that has left many of us weary, tired, and yes, angry. People of color, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, Latinx, Arab, multiracial. We have been swimming in these waters, waiting, hoping, asking our white siblings to realize that they are swimming in it too. Waters that are so deep and wide, it is hard to know where to begin. And perhaps the best place to begin is the place we often call a beginning: the discovery and founding of America. I imagine it's not a new idea for many of you to consider the reality that the story we tell ourselves about America, that Europeans discovered this land and built a new nation grounded in freedom of thought and religion, is, pardon the pun, a whitewashed one. America's European ancestors didn't just arrive and create something new. They erased what was already there. To put it bluntly, they committed a centuries-long genocide, displacing, dehumanizing, and destroying the people and cultures indigenous to this land. People who had been here long before our alleged founding fathers. I have to ask myself, what exactly did they found? What we tell as the story of America is told through a white supremacy culture lens. We often lift up the Constitution and the ideals of democracy that America's founders promoted, but we don't discuss the waters in which those ideas were formed, the waters in which indigenous people were being slaughtered, where African people were being enslaved and sold as property, as 3/5 of a human, the waters in which whiteness was lifted up as the ideal and anything else was animalistic and savage. The waters in which the values of freedom and democracy were defined and codified by the white descendants of those early genocidal colonists. I realize some of you may be feeling a little squirmy now, a little uncomfortable, sad, angry, even hurt. in response to what I'm saying. And in the name of creating a brave space, I invite you not to avoid those feelings, but to swim deeper into them and ask of yourself, why do I feel this way? What's moving inside me in response to this version of the story of America? I invite you to stay with me, to stay in those feelings, to keep listening, no matter how hard it hurts, to stay in these waters and to stay brave as we keep swimming together. Today, we're more likely to name the realities of slavery and genocide as that were a part of the founding of America, but we name it as a part of our past, done and gone. It's time for us to start naming it as our roots, as still feeding us in our culture in subtle ways. It's real easy to name the presence of blatant white supremacists in the present day. They're still out there, but perhaps not as vocal or large in numbers as in decades past. But it's much harder to name the presence of a white supremacy culture, something that is much quieter and embedded in broader cultural norms and expectations. As defined by the Challenging White Supremacy Workshop, white supremacy is an historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and people of color by white peoples and nations of the European continent, for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. As the creators of this teach-in offer in their definition, white supremacy is a set of institutional assumptions and practices, often operating unconsciously, that tend to benefit white people and exclude people of color. A white supremacist culture isn't hoods, burning crosses. It isn't somebody looking at the color of your skin and saying it's dirty. Smaller, more insidious parts of our culture: perfectionism, defensiveness, either-or thinking, discomfort with feelings and emotions, thinking there is only one right way, one right telling of the story, paternalistic thinking that says, I know what's good for you. White supremacy culture sets whiteness as the norm, sets whiteness as the default. It assumes whiteness, and everything else is other. It may be very painful to admit, but there is a white supremacy culture alive and well within Unitarian Universalism and the Unitarian Universalist Association. And even within us, here in this progressive community. In speaking with a few members of color, I've heard stories of the emotional labor that some have to engage in being in a predominantly white congregation. For some, it's about this push-pull. When somebody says something that hurts us, that offends us, even though they have good intentions, it still hurts. And we are left holding those good intentions and our pain, uncertain of whether or not we can say what we're feeling. How will they respond? What will they think of me? For others, it's the push-pull of wanting to be seen and known in this community and not wanting to be tokenized, but still realizing that tokenism is at least better than not being seen at all. When I think about the story this morning with Suki, I have to wonder, what happened the next day in her class? Did her dance, her pride, her joy in who she was transform that classroom into something that they could co-create together? Or was she known as the Japanese kid who dances? Now I imagine that for some of you, this squirmy feeling is building up and perhaps amplified. And parts of you may be strongly resisting the idea that our faith and our community perpetuates a white supremacy culture. And I know there are real feelings and pain behind that. My intentions are good. How do I hold the fact that I caused someone pain? Am I a bad person because I do these things and don't know them? It can feel like a reflection of your worth. It's uncomfortable. And as we sit in this discomfort, I ask you to stay with me as we hear one more story.
This poem, African Prince, is by Adam Dyer. Do not touch my hair. I am not your African prince. I could not be your African prince because you have no idea what Africa or princes actually look like. As you grab my hair atop my head, my crown that holds my history, lost friends, lived places, loved bodies, as you reach out to touch my hair, my story, you only want to connect to your myth of me and continue the age-old assault. In that one childlike gesture, you become a dangerous shadow to me, a fading picture of what once was, the slug of your own life's moisture, sapped by the salt world of men, a faded list of entitlements and rights that silently laid claim to everything around you, clutching at what it could find, among them, my very being. Did you miss it? I crossed myself off that list. I broke those chains. I learned to speak your language and remembered my own. Pointed your direction and said in the universal tongue, no, do not touch my hair. I am not your African prince, nor your Nubian maiden, or exotic Indian brave, hot-blooded Latin spice, or condiment of any kind to be sprinkled on the main course of your life. I am a vital human man, of blood and breath, sinew and semen, art, hope, passion, and quickly fading patience.
That applause makes me breathe easier. I could go on for 20 minutes more about Adam's poem, but I won't because y'all want to go to lunch, I'm sure. In that one childlike gesture, you became a dangerous shadow to me, a fading picture of what once was. This line in the middle of Adam's poem captures the pain and danger that follows when we do not acknowledge the presence of white supremacy in our culture and communities. Those small acts are the remnants of larger pains. Those micro moments are reflections of a larger system that for many feels impossible to escape. The seemingly innocuous statements or questions, the reaching of those hands, are the drops of rain that create the flood. And it is hard not only to acknowledge that reality, but to stay in it long enough to really understand the depth of white supremacy waters that we are swimming in. It is uncomfortable to stay in that place of naming and feeling. And for those of us who are here feeling these waters for perhaps the first time, we need to stay here. We need to find the courage to stay in our discomfort, rather than say, I feel uncomfortable, fix it, fix it, fix it. Don't. Don't try to fix it. Stay there. Stay troubled. Stay uncomfortable. and know you're not alone. Here in this brave space, find the courage to ask where your comfort came from and what has displaced it. Deepen your understanding of the roots of both your comfort and your discomfort, and perhaps realize that we aren't just swimming in the water is flowing within and through us. Stay in it and wonder if it is that water within, that internalized culture of white supremacy that is being stirred up, that is being made troubled and made known to you for perhaps the first time. Feel that water troubling and moving deep within you, and don't try to stop it. Notice it. Notice it and consider the sacredness of this sacred moment in which you are courageous enough to stay in that discomfort, acknowledging what flows around and within us. This moment when you feel the holiness of a disturbance deep within your soul that our culture has prevented or protected you from feeling. Only until we are willing to stay with and engage this discomfort will we really be able to do the work of healing. As our mission statement says, it is the sacred work of transforming ourselves and our world. Only when we are willing to name the aspects of white supremacy that persist in our own faith and community will we be able to truly encourage others to do the same in theirs. Only when we are willing to bravely risk our own comfort as we educate and transform ourselves will we be able to invite and assist others in naming, learning, and transforming our world. Only when we are willing to risk being broken open will we be able to build something new together. Today, we are being asked to listen. We are being asked to feel. We are being asked to name the waters that we are swimming in. And we are being asked to feel not only that troubled water around us and within us, we are being asked to hold it with another truth, a sacred certainty that there is something more beautiful, more joyful, more loving somewhere around the bend. And that work of moving towards it begins by naming exactly where we are.